Hello and welcome back to Dyad and the Force. We have been having an awesome time with the High Republic, and there was 2 books that was released. Last week we did Light of the Jedi. This week we're going to talk a bit about Test of Courage. And here with us we have Fern.
Hello.
How you doing, Fern?
I'm doing well. How are you guys?
We can't complain, you know. Things have been well. And later on in this episode, we also do have an interview with High Republic writer Daniel José Older. So tune in or stick around for that. But yeah, we are here to talk about A Test of Courage. Right? The High Republic had Light of the Jedi, and this is the junior novel. And this is something that I'm not really used to doing, and there was a little bit of introspective on my part, because I was treating junior novels in Star Wars the same way I treated Rebels. You know, this is a book for kids, this is a show for kids. But as soon as I watched Rebels, I loved it. It's my favorite show, even above Throne Wars. So when I read this, I was pleasantly surprised with the subject matter, the lore that's inside, and the journey of these characters. So before we go into spoilers, just really quick, Fern, your impressions of the book, your overall review, if you will, of A Test of Courage.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I have a soft spot for YA and middle grade fiction, and I actually haven't read a ton of just literature aimed at a younger audience in a while. And so this felt like dipping my toes back in and coming back to a genre that I really enjoy, and writing for an audience that I really enjoy. I thought that it had all of the things I loved about Light of the Jedi were also present in this book. So it was great.
Jumping into this, it has, like you said, it is aimed at a younger audience, but typically that just means that it has a more hopeful tone. And I mean, who couldn't use more hope, especially right now? So I appreciated it, and especially reading this along with Light of the Jedi, it was like a palate cleanser type thing. It's still on very much on brand, but you jump from this large scale event to something that's a little bit more intimate, where you get to spend time and just kind of marinate with these characters, and all the characters were unique and different and entertaining.
Absolutely. And you know, apart from it being like a YA or a junior novel, like it's an interesting perspective to read, because most of what we learn about the Force, especially from Light of the Jedi, was from the Masters and the Knights, who are more accomplished and have more set in stone perspectives of the Force. And previous to that, or prior to that, was Masters of the Fallen, or the Fallen Age, with Yoda, Qui-Gon, and Mace, and that order. And so I love to nowadays recommend this book alongside Light of the Jedi, because we are following a Padawan. We are following a new knight. And some of the things, some of the lore, some of the narratives in this, I was still learning. And I'm like a self-proclaimed lore guy. But it had further enhanced my understanding of the Force. And so I definitely would recommend you guys to check out A Test of Courage. If you've read Light of the Jedi, it's an even better read having read that story. It is a companion book, which means that it references a lot of Light of the Jedi, and it has events that occur alongside Light of the Jedi. And if you're looking for a quick and easy consume as well, it's you know, obviously it's a lighter read, but it's a shorter read as well. And so if you're looking for that quick one night book consume, this is a really good one. Do we have any other thoughts before we dive right into the story?
Not more without spoilers, so let's jump in.
Without further ado, we are headed into spoiler territory. So if you have not read A Test of Courage, go read it and then come right back to this podcast. Or if you're just brave and you want to know the story and not read it, that's perfectly fine as well. Stick around with us. We're going to dive straight into the story here with part 1, which begins us on Port Hayleap and the disaster of the Steady Hand. Chaco, what's happening right now?
Yeah, so we are experiencing the kind of the start of the Republic that we get to see in the prequels, where right now it's just this age of expansion, and again this golden age of hope, and we're going to be going on this mission to try and bring over this new culture into the fold of the Republic, because it's going to be mutually beneficial. At the same time, we're traveling to the Starlight Beacon, which is going to play a big role in a lot of the stories here in the High Republic, and we get introduced to some new characters, but one of which is a new Jedi Knight. She's quite talented at being a Jedi Knight while being new. And then the other one is, we have a Padawan. We're getting introduced to a lot of unique characters that, like you said, we get to experience this story from them learning from their own experience, rather than having them learn from a master like we had with someone like Ahsoka. So it was interesting. Plus, we're touching on a little bit of the politics of the era. Plus, some of these kids have just wildly different backgrounds.
Yeah. So we meet these characters, and there's reference to a few of them in Light of the Jedi. And when I encountered that line while reading that book, I put a little exclamation point next to it, because I was like, they sound interesting. I'd love to learn more about them. And then we do. I could read an entire book just about Fern and from her perspective and her experience of being this essentially prodigy, this very young knight, where she is talented, she's accomplished, but she also is 16. And there's a lot that comes along with being 16 years old and trying to navigate the world at that age. So I am hoping to hear more from her in the future.
Oh yeah, absolutely. She has, crept into one of my favorite characters from the High Republic, because she gives me Ahsoka vibes. Of course, Ahsoka isn't described a lot as a prodigious Jedi, but she is quite capable, and she is young when she joins as Anakin's Padawan. I think she was 14 at the start of her Padawan to Anakin. You can correct me if I'm wrong, Chaco. Are you? If I'm wrong? No? Am I not wrong?
No, I don't recall exactly what age she ended up being chosen, but she had a unique adventure of being chosen not by the person that was going to be training her. So it's a little unique in that case, but I think she was 13.
Yeah, and then we meet the Padawan Imri Kentaros, or Kentaros, however you want to say it, who has a master. And I want to point out this master because this is a contention for Chaco, right? He wants more Jedi with these names.
The dude's name is Douglas.
I think it was 2 weeks ago. You're like, where's our Steves? Where's our Jeffs? Yeah, we have Jedi Master Douglas Sunvale. And this is a tragic part. It's a lighter read than Light of the Jedi, but it's still a very tragic beginning. So the Steady Hand gets attacked by the Nile, and just like in Revenge of the Sith, the bulkhead is blasted open, and they have the harsh throes of space to contend with, and Douglas is shielding everyone, and at some point Vernestra is also helping him, and I thought this was an amazing line in the book that we finally do have an explanation for this plot hole from Revenge of the Sith. How do they survive with the space being sucked out or their oxygen being sucked out? And it's quite simply the Jedi train for it. They train to survive the harshness of space temporarily, and then we can see that Douglas is in fact creating a barrier, much like a makeshift airlock system, and he's keeping everyone also from being sucked out. I thought it was a really interesting part. But Chaco, your thoughts on this part where he makes the eternal sacrifice and they have to make their escape, all these kids.
I mean, again, this is showing exactly what the Jedi should be, what they're, this is them at their best. And, they're saving the kids. They're making the right choice. They're sacrificing themselves, and it's without a second thought. So yeah, it was a darker moment, but also something that was telling about, the Jedi being at their peak at this time. And then we also got a little bit of some interesting, some more details about the Nile themselves. On, these people are, the disasters are not all what is, organized or allowed by Marchion Ro. These are their side smaller missions. These people are hoping to make a name for themselves, and they have these ambitions. And so it really contextualizes, Light of Jedi was focused on the higher ups in the Nile organization, and now we get to see the ground level peoples.
Absolutely.
Which is something that I was hoping to see, and I'm glad we got to see, because I still have this question in my head of, well, what causes people to join the Nile? Why is this a choice you make at a time when the galaxy is prospering? And to see these folks who are not part of the leadership of this organization and yet do have these ambitions and these plans, I thought was really interesting.
Yeah, it's kind of like trying to understand why people gatekeep.
True.
It's like I try not to put myself in their minds, lest I be, indoctrinated in some way. But
how niche of you.
But then they do survive this, this escape, and they take this escape shuttle that was unsuccessfully sabotaged. Or was it successfully sabotaged by the Nile?
As with most stories, right? I mean, no story is going to be interesting if you have carbon copies of the same character, unless you're watching Naruto and it's Kage Bunshin's. But when we have our own little crew, and that's like one of my favorite things. I love heist movies. I love things where you're like, okay, this person is the tech person, and then this person is, we have the fledgling, Jedi that's unsure because they aren't where they should be, and then we have the prodigy one that's further along than this one, but is also unsure because they are just not experienced in life. And then, we have someone who's kind of self-important.
Yeah.
A little bit like a would-be leader, but someone who's not actually the leader. And so you end up with like and then we got the robot who ends up being a super cool robot. I really like him. But yeah, we end up with this interesting crew, and the more varied the crew, the more interesting dynamics that we have to work with the interpersonal struggles.
Yeah, what I really liked about this section where they're all sort of stuck in this spaceship shuttle together was that we get to see for the first time how each character deals with grief. And we continue to see this throughout the book. They all react in different ways. I think they all react in very realistic ways. But no two are alike. There's denial, there's just like acceptance. It's all very complicated though.
Yeah, and even beyond the varying nature of these characters, there's very stark dichotomies between them as well. Like Vernestra and Imri Vernestra is a prodigy and has doubts, but Imri isn't a prodigy and is having clear troubles with his studies and his training and even building his own lightsaber, and he still has doubts. So it's kind of like there's a stark difference between the two personality wise, but they share a commonality. And the same goes for like Avon and Honesty, who are the other two characters we failed to to introduce to you guys. But Avon is like this kind of technical genius who reprograms her J6 droid to be a little bit more to have a little more personality. And Honesty, so Avon is a little bit like, she's having trouble with sensing the belonging in her family, and she has trouble accepting, you know, what her mother did for her. And Honesty comes from the family who is like a warrior culture, right? And they teach that self-reliance and independence, but he's still at the core of him, he's still very unsure. Everyone is unsure on this journey, and I think it's telling when we land on Wevo, which is the moon that they land on. They figure this out using an almanac, which I thought it was kind of funny using that earthly term.
Yeah.
It won a whole story about that guy who wrote this almanac. If I have to write it myself, I'll do it. But I was very interested in that.
But they land on Wevo, and it's a very hostile, very harsh environment. And so Chaco, let's talk about their journey through this jungle environment with acid rain and rapidly regenerating growth, brush and vegetation, and one of the oldest things in Star Wars, but a newer one in canon. I think you know what I mean.
Yeah, I mean, so one of the cool things is having different planets that truly do feel like different worlds. This one, it's just kind of placed to us as like this type of jungle planet, but it's pretty harsh environment. Like you mentioned, it rains acid, and if you don't go somewhere, you aren't gonna do too well. But this is a natural phenomenon here because, and we know this because the natural life forms are already prepped to deal with. So this isn't something that was done to it. This is just a very unique and harsh environment. And so, going through it, they have to find cover really quick. And that's when we find out a little bit more about one of the coolest things to be confirmed in the new canon, which is the lightsaber whip. We saw this in Legends with Lumia. I sometimes butcher her name, but as well as Githany in the Old Republic.
Yeah.
But it's not something that has existed in Star Wars canon at any point, and so now we finally have it. And it's interesting because she was almost ashamed of it, but the design kind of came to her, and so I'm curious what that means as well. I'm excited to see where this goes.
I thought it was so interesting that there's like this assigned morality to the different weapons. Like, she is afraid that this light whip is going to tempt Imri to the dark side. And in my mind, I was thinking, but it's the same, like sword, whip, it's all the same, right? But then I remembered something Bell says in Light of the Jedi about how a lightsaber is designed to do as little harm as possible to, actually marked the page, hang on. Designed to end conflicts, injure no more than necessary, and in the horrible circumstance where death is the only possible outcome, they'll kill quickly. And so I wonder if that has something to do with it, that the whip is not as delicate, is not as kind, I guess.
Definitely harder to control, right? But arguably, I think a whip is easier to be more forgiving. If you can control it, lashing people instead of cutting off their limbs.
True.
Although I will make the argument that it is a far less defensive weapon.
Yes. But we don't know the deeper mechanics behind it. It's still a lightsaber, right? So it'll still magnetically pull or attract other lightsabers. And it's interesting when you bring up like her almost how she's ashamed of having this weapon, and she even hid it from her own master. And I think it largely has to do with what Imri says about like this kind of preconceived notion that only Light Sisters used it, and they were, famously dark side. But the point I'm trying to make before getting long-winded is she, despite her hiding the light whip, she had her explanation like cocked and ready to go. It's like, but that's a dark side tool. It's like, actually no. If you read Serval the Uncanny, they use light whips against Sith who use forbidden forms. And I was like, first of all, you're just gonna name drop like that and not tell me about Serval the Uncanny,
right?
And the Guardians of Javis or Javan, and I'm like, hey, hold on. And this is what me and Chaka have been kind of contending with, and I'm sure you have, is these droplets of lore that is ancient to the High Republic. Because if we're in like the prequels or the originals or sequels, talk about ancient Jedi texts, yeah, sure, those are old. That's old knowledge, old history. Mm-hmm. But going back to the High Republic, even older knowledge. So who is Serval? Those are like questions I was asking as I was reading, but it's cool that she had her explanation for the light whip just in the chamber ready to go. It's almost like she was rehearsing it for the time that she had to talk to Stellan. Was like, yeah, this is my light whip.
I do love that in the midst of just being in this torrential downpour of acid rain, they're having this philosophical debate about the nature of light whips and whether or not they're acceptable for use.
I mean, this leads me to my first thoughts when we hit this is, these are adolescents, right? She's 16. Is this a clear allegory for something else? I mean that this may be a metaphor for something with her sexuality or something, I'm picking up that it's something that because of what she's been taught or heard all of her life, she's ashamed of or finding reasons that this has to be a thing. But at the same time, it came to her. It's natural. This is her building. This is part of her, and her control of it is an indication that it is her. At least that's how I took it.
I like that a lot. Yeah, I would like to see that explored further, which is why I want more stories where Vern is the point of view character. But yeah, that's a really interesting analysis or interpretation of that.
Yeah, we need more. We need the High Republic Vernestra.
Yes.
I don't know, these young like new knights and Padawans, almost, and I say this arguably, almost more interesting than the Masters, even though I love the Masters. I love Man and Chris, Loden, Bell. I love all of these characters, but just like the new knights and the Padawans, like especially, okay, so we'll get there when we reach part 3, but let's talk about the cave dynamic, Honesty's survival skills coming into play, J6's personality, and of course their strength in keeping leaves levitated above their head for like extended and prolonged periods of time. Like let's get into this part, Fern. Like what jumped out at you the most?
I loved everything in the caves, specifically because it reminded me of my favorite Star Wars book when I was a kid, Secrets of the Jedi by Jude Watson, in which Obi-Wan Kenobi and Siri Tachi spend a lot of time in a cave with a kid that they're responsible for protecting. So very similar situation, very similar vibes, and I just ate it up. You do get these kids interacting more. You do, once again, see the different ways they're processing grief and trauma, because all of these kids have experienced loss in different ways. Even Avon, who didn't have someone close to her on this ship, we learned that like she has had traumatic experiences of her own. And so it was these quiet little moments of the characters just talking and sharing their experiences that I was really drawn to in this section.
Yeah, I mean, while they're in the cave, especially, I was trying to recall the name of their little pet.
Chansey, right? Huh?
It was Shiri.
Shiri, yeah, okay.
Which
they called them pansies.
Yes. Weird little monkey squirrel things that they find this fruit and they're just grabbing as much of it as they can, but because the vegetation grows so fast that there will be more tomorrow. But having them experience this stuff while in the cave, the cave, all being in the cave gives you kind of cabin fever, and it'll rub certain people, certain personalities wrong the more that you are with the same people. But like Fern said before, we still have all these kids are dealing with grief, and some of them have deep loss, some of them it's just anger, and honesty. I never liked this character at any point. But I appreciated him as this different voice, and it made sense, especially consider who he was from this warrior culture. And of course he's gonna be mad. Of course he's gonna try to take revenge. And then some of the stuff with J6 and her personality, and watching that slowly evolve into this weird mother hen with manic violence type deal. There's a lot of interesting stuff here.
Yeah, and we know that Avon personally modified J6's personality matrix, and it is so interesting that even the evolutions that J6 takes in this story, even Avon wasn't even expecting it. Like she made some modifications for J6 to act a little bit more like this way, and then it went totally this way, and Avon's like, I didn't plan that. Interesting, writes the notes and stuff like that. That's really cool.
Are there other droids who are self-actualized like that, or is this the first time we're seeing?
I mean, L3 is.
Yeah.
L3 built her own chassis and all that stuff too. But it's definitely not the norm.
Right.
I definitely tagged J Stubes because she had a wonderful video about droid rights, and I was like, well, you know what? There's a little bit of a call to action here. They talk about them feeling sorry for the droids and how they're not like, they don't have autonomy for themselves.
Even over their own personalities, they have no autonomy. They're given programmed personalities. Yeah.
That's so true. That's a great point. Even if they become self-aware and they grow out of their predetermined programming, it was still that programming that was their genesis,
It also kind of harkens back to Obi-Wan's line of if droids could think, none of us would be here. Which, I mean, I think that needs to be the final arc in Star Wars, is a droid uprising, because everyone's screwed.
Everyone wants an uprising, droid uprising, stormtrooper rebellion. They want these revolts to happen. I'm gonna give it to them in Echoes of the Past. But before we get to part 3, we did have an interview with Star Wars writer Daniel José Older. So here is the interview.
Hello and welcome to Dyad and the Force. I'm super excited today. We have Daniel José Older, writer and author of High Republic Adventures, which is releasing on February 3rd. Welcome.
Thank you. It's really great to be here. How you guys doing?
Doing well.
Doing great. Great now.
Thank you so much for joining us today on the podcast. We are both big fans of Star Wars, and we appreciate the opportunity to talk to a writer of Star Wars. It's quite an honor.
It's my pleasure. I really have been enjoying y'all's TikToks, like both of you, and you know, I'm new to TikTok, so it's been really cool to just kind of jump in and see I just have to say, like, the level of discourse is very high and very friendly compared to Twitter. I love Twitter, and there's a lot of great people on there, don't get me wrong, but my experience has just been so different. And obviously, like, we find our little corners and stuff, but people are just so cool on there, and they're like so many kids playing with lightsabers. It's just like so.
Yeah, we found a small little nice corner where, you know, the appreciation for Star Wars is a nice and positive environment.
It's really beautiful.
Yeah, that's been one of our biggest goals is for a while, you know, on YouTube, there was just a lot of negativity and all this stuff, and almost all of it's wrong, like really like poorly crafted narratives and stuff. So
isn't that the worst part? You're like, you're not even a good troll. You're just making up random junk. Like, come on, man.
And that's how I actually connected with Pep here, because I started making TikToks just to try and, you know, help create positivity. And yeah, it's been great, and our next goal is to start making more content on YouTube, so super excited. But I gotta get started by asking you, how did you get into Star Wars in general? Like, do you have a favorite era, and also I gotta hear your top 3 films.
All right, interesting. I did. Okay. My love of Star Wars started when I was 3 years old. Return of the Jedi came out that year. It was the first movie I saw in the cinemas, and it blew my mind. I ran out of the theater when the rancor came, but ran back and kept running back and stayed. I think the second moment of my love for Star Wars was when one of those behind the scenes about Return of the Jedi dropped, and I was just so obsessed with it. I wanted to work in the creature shop. Like, I just wanted to make monsters for a living. That was one of my first dream jobs as a child. So yeah, it's just been going strong ever since. You know, we had the action figures, like we were your typical 80s kids, like just with all the Star Wars stuff. And there was that long period of just nothing, right? Like, it's just like, what's gonna happen? So yeah, I'm an original trilogy kid for sure. Top 3 movies. God, it's so hard. I think about this all the time, and there's no easy answer. Return of the Jedi is one, no question, just because of that aspect of it. But like, I also just genuinely love that movie. Like, I love it. It holds up. That opening sequence with Jabba's palace just profoundly affected me as a creator. I love
Same.
it. Yeah, it's so good. Everything about it is so great, and just the whole movie. Jeez. I think a tie for my second favorite. First of all, The Mandalorian is up there. I mean, I know we're talking, but like, I feel like The Mandalorian is just like,
it works. I mean, it's the same amount, if not more content. So
right, it's literally more. Like, yeah. So I don't know if that's cheating, but that's probably number 2 for me. And I really put like, and I know this is kind of weird and almost controversial, but to me, The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi are almost like a perfect dyad. Like, they go together so perfectly. And they're so different, but they complement each other in exactly the right ways that, you know, New Hope and Empire complement each other, but they're very much their own movies anyway, to me. And they just go like hand in hand. Like, I really can't decide. I think I like The Force Awakens a little bit more just because it's so much fun. And it just like, and the moment too, I have another nostalgic love for it in a way, because like, seeing it felt so much like, it just felt like so perfectly in the Star Wars world in a way that I just hadn't felt for so long, you know. And it was like coming home, and it was just like all those moments just felt like all that fan service worked on me 100%. I was just there like, and it was really seeing the downed Star Destroyers on Jakku.
Right.
I just love that, because one thing I love so much about Star Wars is the history, and how much Star Wars is in love with its own history in a good way, and it cares about its own history. Like, there's no other franchise like that with that degree of historical love. And so seeing those down Star Destroyers, they're just like, yes, here is a world that is like, that has lived and been lived in. and it's one that I knew from when I was a child, and now we're getting to see it expand and like.
And being able to see the scene where the Falcon gets seen, like I remember the energy of that in the theaters.
Yeah, exactly, totally.
But I mean, nothing wrong with having that up there. You know, you're talking to two people who happen to share the same second favorite, being
first and second, right?
Yeah, Empire, The Last Jedi, Return of the Jedi are my top three.
Okay. Okay, Return of the Jedi is your one.
No, other way around. Empire 1.
Oh, Empire's your one.
Jedi 2,
Gotcha.
Return of the Jedi.
I do love Empire. With Empire, it's that I'm such a creature-focused person, and I just wanted more creatures.
Yeah.
There's a lot, but I'm just like, this is the same thing with Rogue One. Rogue One is like one of the most magnificently made Star Wars movies, no question. You know, the shot for shot, story is incredible, all that. I just like need creatures for it to be in my like top tier. You know, but that's very personal. You know, I totally recognize that. Like, that's not about the quality of the movie. That's just my weird creature thing.
Yeah.
Well, it's, you know, every movie means something different to everyone in the world. So, you know, everyone's rankings are always vastly different from each other. And the next person you ask might even just say A New Hope is their favorite, or The Phantom Menace.
Yeah, totally. That's what's so great about it. It's like the content is so varied, but still feels unified.
Yeah. So you mentioned that you're new to TikTok.
Yes.
So I have to ask,
yes.
like, how did you get into TikTok, and why now?
Great question. You know, one basic reason is that, like, I don't know if you guys know this, but Twitter is kind of like obsessed with TikTok. Like, I did it the other day. I didn't mean to. And in my head, I was like, I never want to be one of those people that posts someone else's TikTok on Twitter and goes viral with it. And then I did. But I was careful to make sure I like gave her credit. It's Shayla Wren.
Yeah, she's a good friend to us. We've had her on and stuff.
Oh, great.
Like, she's awesome.
TikToker. And so I made sure to link to her TikTok. Like, I was trying to do it in the most, you know, honorable way possible. And I was just like, Twitter just needs to see this analysis about Padme. And so I posted it, and I was like, here's the person. She wasn't on Twitter yet. I think she kind of got on Twitter because it went viral. And then newspapers were covering it. It's a whole thing. But I didn't mean to. Like, it went way more viral than most of my tweets that I've ever tweeted.
It's a great video.
It's such a good video, you know. So then she popped up in my mentions on Twitter, and I was like, oh, follow this person, you know. But anyway, there's just, the content is clearly so good, and you can tell, because again, like, Twitter's kind of been my home base for social media for a long time. I've been on there like 10 years, and that's where I just feel the most at home. But also it gets old a lot sometimes, you know. And then honestly too, I was talking to some social media person at my literary agency who was like, you know, TikTok is actually like a really good place for a writer to be. You should try it, and you make funny videos. So I was like, well, that's true. I do, you know, yeah, I'm fun. So I was like, let me try it, you know, let me see. And it's really enjoyable.
But yeah, jumping into the High Republic, we had this awesome launch.
Yes.
Both of us we are caught up.
I know.
What was this like? How was crafting this new time period?
We continue to have a really good time. It's really just like an ideal creative process. People are just really supportive, both at Lucasfilm and on the team, in a way that I kind of knew already from writing Last Shot. Like, I had a really great experience writing Last Shot, and I went into it prepared not because I'd heard anything bad about them, but just because I know what IP is like, what writing, you know, in other people's sandboxes is like, from hearing other people talk about it from different experiences, and I know it can be a nightmare. So I was kind of bracing myself, but I was like, it's Star Wars. I really want to do it, and I put myself out there to do it, and the opportunity came, so I definitely, you know, took it, of course. But it was fun. I had a great time. Everyone was really nice. You know, I didn't get any kind of like ridiculous, like, no, you can't do that, or pull this character, none of the nonsense that can sometimes happen and is also reasonable. But none of that, you know, happened, or not in any way that was really obstructive or difficult. So I knew it was going to be cool, but I didn't know it was going to be that cool. I was talking on TikTok today, actually, just about like the process of pitching was so eye-opening, because pitching is terrifying. Like,
It
especially pitching to Star Wars. Like, you know, like even having written a Star Wars novel, it's still a lot to take in. Like, okay, you know, we all got together and threw all these ideas around, and we each came to the table with stuff, and it wasn't terrifying. And that's because it was day 3 at that point, 2 or 3, I can't remember what, of the first session out on the ranch, and they just created an atmosphere. Story group was there, a couple other folks, and the writers, and Mike, of course. And it was just a very comfortable atmosphere where, like, no one was going to be shooting each other down. Like, no one was going to be on that ego tip. Folks were really just out there to try to create good stories. And I didn't feel like invested in my story in the sense of like, or in the ideas I was putting out there in an egotistical way. I was just like, well, this would be cool, but that would be cool too. Oh, but we could put them together and do something really cool and shave off a little here. And, you know, that's how stories should be created. But it's very hard because there are so many egos involved, and there's so many other things and baggage and BS and whatever. But this process has just been really free of that. And it's been such a blessing.
So in crafting the time period, you come across the project High Republic Adventures. I know this is like, you know, thin ice territory, so to speak. Like, I mean, what can you tell us about the project without?
No, I can totally talk about it because some of it's been released already. Those 5 pages from the sampler and stuff. But really, I think the main takeaway about the High Republic Adventure is that it is an epic saga within an epic saga. I think Star Wars has been a little overly cautious about letting some of the all ages material like really hit major story beats, which is ironic because Star Wars is all ages from jump, right? It's always been all ages, but I get it because you know, there's a lot of adult readers, and that's kind of where a lot of the stuff happens, and they're buying books. But you know, I love like the Star Wars adventure stuff that Cav has done, and just all the stuff they've been putting out from IDW. But this was a chance for us to really just do this huge epic saga in this era that is hugely interconnected to all of the other pieces, right? So we go really in depth into the higher echelons of the Nile leadership, because that's where some of the characters take us. So we get like inside exposure to the Niles at like very major plot points in what the Nile are doing that's not covered by books, and it's not covered by Marvel. Like, it's really telling its own story about the Nile that really connects into later work that does happen in the books. Having said that, you can still get the full story. Like, if you just read the IDW series, High Republic Adventures, you will get an entire story, you know. But these characters are like in it for the long haul, and they're complex. You know, we already have one. Zine grew up like in this community of people that don't mess with the Force at all, and they're like, people should not use the Force, but she is Force sensitive, and she's been keeping it a secret her whole life, right? So from jump, we just have these characters that are already internally conflicted in different ways, and it's all just kind of about to explode.
Speaking of characters, though, we do have Yoda in there.
We have Yoda in there.
Is this like the first inkling of Yoda in action in the High Republic?
Mm-hmm. He shows up in issue 1 of the Marvel series, but just kind of walking by, like not in action. But yeah, we see him like, because he's out in the world, you know, with the crew, with his Padawans, and they run into danger quite immediately, you know. So he really is an action hero in this series, which is like so much fun.
I mean, in Light of the Jedi, Avar Kriss can feel Yoda from across the galaxy.
I love that moment.
And as well as there's a throwaway line by Bell where he's like, I don't even think that Yoda could do this. And so you're like, oh, so he's probably a bigger beast back then.
Yeah, he's a beast. He's unstoppable. And this is a time when, this is kind of what I love about the initiative, and like a lot of the conversations, you know, people have been having about how diversified the Force is from different users' point of views, you know, specifically in Charles's novel, but that's true throughout the initiative. I feel like it speaks to the idea that, like, in a time of Renaissance, in a time of peace, we can use our powers for so many different things. You know, like so many things get to happen that don't when those resources are being thrown into war. And since we've only really known Star Wars in times of like intergalactic war, that's true of the Force too. So we're seeing the Force from the eyes of people who only know times of peace, right? Even if like war is obviously approaching them in a very real way, they grew up in a time of peace. So that's how their relationship to the Force is. And so you get all these different people, including like the character I introduced at that launch event, Ram, who's in the middle grade, which comes in over the summer. I don't know what to say, over the summer. And, he's like, it's not that he has a different Force ability, it's that he loves mechanical stuff. And that's how he understands the world. And that's how he just wants to like escape to his garage and do mechanical stuff. But he's also Force sensitive. So he gets to use the Force like as a mechanic, basically, and like he can because it's peacetime. He doesn't have to deal with like, chopping people in half.
Yeah. One of my favorite parts of the book was also like Porter Engle, who was,
I love that character.
He was making omelets one minute, and then the next minute he's the blade of Bardata.
Yes, right. I love that character. I remember reading that character and I was like, oh, I hope he doesn't die because I want to write him. That's the great thing about being part of this initiative is like you get to like pull these cool characters and be like, oh, let me bring him in over here and whatever. It's great.
Okay, I have a random question to kind of toss in there because it's something that we discovered the other day. Where do the character models come from? The reason we asked is because the character model for Bell, could have sworn we saw him in the Xbox Star Wars Connect game. Dancing.
I have. You mean the concept art?
Yeah, the concept art for the characters. I'm curious if there's like a whole flip book of like these are all the characters we've designed. These ones aren't used yet. So if you want to make backstories, whatever.
Some stuff is pulled, but it's more like tech. Like the speeders that we use in the High Republic Adventures are like they were pulled from old concept art from back in the day, from the original trilogy. That wasn't used, which is really cool. And some of the spaceships like that, I don't think the characters that I know of, but I could be wrong. I don't know because sometimes they just send us stuff. That works.
It was just a random thing. I was showing them how absurd it was, and then we're like, wait a second, is that Bell? Yeah. Although I am excited about this big Shagrian Jedi that's coming.
Buckets of blood. You just wanted me to say it.
I did. I really did. But he does look quite badass.
He is really badass. But he's also not a fighter. He's really like, don't put me in the line of fire. I'm not here to do all that. And they're like, well, bro, the Nile about to kill us all. So, I don't know what to tell you. But, that's real. It's like I said, that he was a dude. He was a legendary dude on the streets back in EMS before my time. And people just used to talk about him. And I was like, man, I wish I could meet that dude. And I was like, street lore is such a great place to pull from creatively. Mm-hmm. And medics are really good storytellers. A lot of my writing, I just learned on the ambulance from hearing. We would tell each other stories about crazy, ridiculous stuff that went down. And you're like, why am I laughing? This is tragic.
Oh, my uncle is like 6'4" and was like 290, and he was a defensive tackle in football. He was security at an emergency room, and he has some of the most like horrifying but hilarious stories that you can imagine. Yep. So it's a great thing to pull from. Definitely. But so I don't want us to spoil what you're writing, but let's zoom out a little bit and talk about kind of writing in general, because it's something that both Pep and I try to dabble in ourselves quite unsuccessfully as of yet. But what made you start writing, and do you have any other favorite like books or Star Wars books?
Let's see. I definitely, for me, it's always been stories. So as a kid, it was really like I did want to work in the creature shop one day, but cartoons were kind of my main thing. Comics and cartoons as a kid. I remember trying to do the Iliad, like a comic version of the Iliad, because I was ambitious.
That is an ambitious one.
Yeah. I got a couple of chapters in. But yeah, I've always loved comics and cartoons. And then but I would draw creatures, and they would always have like a story. And then in college, it was like a little bit of filmmaking, but really music kind of took me over. And I did that for most of my 20s. I was doing beats, like I was composing music for small-time independent filmmakers, stuff like that, puppeteers, randomly. People who can't pay very, very well. people who are working off grants like I was, and that makes it hard. And I got really fed up with just all the other stuff that wasn't writing, that wasn't storytelling, and wasn't the art. And that's music, especially, involves so much of that, like just wrangling musicians. I love musicians. I am a musician, but Lord, trying to get them to go places, and then like production, which I didn't want to do, getting gigs, putting gigs together, getting people out to get, none of that was what I wanted to do, but that's the job when you're just getting started as a musician. So I realized at some point, like, this is not going to get me off the ambulance, and it's an amazing job being a paramedic. I did it for 10 years, but I knew I didn't want to do it my whole life. So then I was like, this was literally January of 2009, 29. And I sat down and I was just like, if I write a book, I won't have to deal with any of this. And that would be amazing. So I started writing a book that became Shadow Shaper, which was my first book. It got rejected 40 times immediately after I wrote it. And it took me about 4 years to sell it. But then Scholastic bought it. It was a New York Times bestseller, and it was nominated. It was nominated for a bunch of awards, and it won one of them. It's done a lot of things. It was named one of the top 100 fantasy books of all time last year by Time Magazine, which is crazy. I still think about that, and I'm like, ow.
That's cool.
It's really cool. Yeah. So, and then everything came out of that. In that interim period when it was getting rejected, I was writing short stories. I found a mentor. I was taking a class. Those were getting rejected. I started turning those into a collection that eventually became my first book from a small publisher. And things were just very gradually moving forward. And I wrote 2 books, one of which comes out in like 2 weeks. That's Flood City, which is a middle grade science fiction book. I wrote that 10 years ago. That's how publishing is so weird, because books that I wrote, I just finished Crash Point Tower, which comes out in the summertime. So things are weird like that in publishing. But that's kind of my origin story.
Yeah, that's really cool. Did you have any? Well, one thing that I have noticed, at least in Last Shot, is that you seem to care a lot about representation, the inclusivity and diversity, but it was never in a way that was in your face or anything like that. And so it seems like it's important to you, but you weave it into the narrative so naturally that I didn't even notice at first that Taka was non-binary in the book, and there's certain interesting things like that. Just curious on your thoughts or how you approach that.
Yeah. Thank you, first of all. I'm glad that it comes across that way. To me, it's really about just telling the truth. You know what I mean? Like, the world is just full of lots of different people. That's what makes the world so awesome. And my friends, are different, lots of different colors and genders. And like, that's just a reality. I feel like I would be lying if I didn't. And I feel like my job as a writer is not to lie. That's like my number one job. My job is to tell the truth, and the truth can include, huts and hyperspace. But what it can't do is feel like a lie, like in terms of like what we know to be true about the world. And that's a complicated line to walk when you're dealing with another universe entirely, of course. But at the end of the day, like, what I think about a lot of diversity. One time I interviewed Sonia Manzano. She's Maria on Sesame Street. Yeah, watch that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, a legend. I love her so much. And she's just a great person. She's a writer too. And she was telling the story about when she was a little girl and her parents took her to Broadway for the first time. And she grew up in the Bronx. So she went to like Times Square and she was like, oh my God, it's so diverse. And I cackled because, at the time I was living in Brooklyn, and like Times Square is like, yes, there's a lot of tourists, but like in terms of like Manhattan's like very white, compared to Brooklyn. And so it's like not the place that you think about going to for diversity. But when you live in the Bronx, you're surrounded by Black and brown people, seeing white people as diverse, right? And it just jumped out at me because it's like that word is so meaningless in a way, but people kind of use it to be like, you're writing non-white people, right? Like, and I get it, like you need shorthand, and like it's just like it's so interesting the way language kind of just takes over our brains in different ways. But at the end of the day, yeah, it's like why wouldn't there be? I can't think of any good argument why there wouldn't be non-binary people in Star Wars that's not transphobic, and I think it's sort of fascinating when people find that to be political. Like the very existence of someone of an identity is political, right? Like, first of all, Star Wars has always been political. There's never a time when Star Wars wasn't political. Ask that guy George, he will tell you. Like he said it from the beginning. Someone, was it TikTok or Twitter? I can't remember. Someone recently was like, if you take the politics out of Star Wars, all you have is Star.
Yes. This was literally a video I made on TikTok.
Was it you? You said that?
No. I don't know who made that video, but one of my videos was literally saying that Star Wars is political because you need political funding behind a war.
Exactly. And no one knows that better than Star Wars, right? There's literally plot lines about the banking clans and trade tariffs. Like, that's the most that's more political than even I like to get into, and I'm a politics nerd. Yeah. I was reading All the President's Men when I was 11. That's what a politics nerd I am. But the point is, even if you do want politics out of your Star Wars, which is weird, you don't. You just want your own politics in there, probably. Cool. People's identities are not inherently political, if you see them that way, then that's a conversation you have to have with yourself. Why does that threaten me? I don't know. You got to talk to you about that. You can't talk to me about that because I don't care. You know what I mean? Well, not that I don't care, but that's not for me to figure out.
It's not anything you can fix for them.
I can't do that work for you. All I can do is relate the world the way I see it, the way I know it. I know plenty of non-binary people and lots of different kinds of people of color, lots of different white people, and there's no reason under the sun that they shouldn't be on Tatooine or Mandalore, period.
Yeah. I mean, and speaking of diversity, just a little quick aside, in the last shot, something that jumps out at me, your exposition is so unique and excellent. And I wanted to know what informs your exposition, your choice of words, and just how you approach your descriptors and creating a scene.
When you say exposition, you mean like my prose?
Yeah.
Oh, thank you, man. I really appreciate that. That means a lot to me. I'm not kidding at all. That really means a lot to me. Because I struggle with description. Description is it's not comfortable for me. Dialogue, I clearly enjoy because I enjoy talking. You know what I mean? And I enjoy listening. And like I said, a lot of my, look, I got an MFA 10 years after I graduated college. I didn't learn to write with an MFA. I don't think that's how you learn to write. An MFA is handy for career choices. You do learn a lot, but that's not where I learned to write. I learned to write, yes, throughout high school and college for sure, but also, like I said, on the ambulance, in the bodegas, just living in Brooklyn, listening to my neighbors. Bochinche is the word for gossip, the Cuban word for gossip. It's such a great word. But that's where I learned so much. And for me, I love a book that feels like it's sitting across the table from you, having a beer with you or a cup of coffee or whatever. I just really value that in a book. So I try to bring that to my books. I want it to feel like we're right there talking. And I think there's so much poetry in the way that we talk to each other, in the weird little turns of phrases that we use without even thinking about it, they just come out of us. So that's what I'm always kind of reaching for. And then there's certain moments that I know I have to stop and be all right, this is a moment I really have to nail a description of it. I really have to get the action extraordinarily clear, otherwise it'll become a jumble, And so that's when I try to really stop myself and focus in on that. But otherwise, I'm just trying to tell a story. I learned as a paramedic, one of the ways I started writing actually was blogging. I would get home from a weird shift on the ambulance and I worked the overnights, and I would just get home and write it out. And it would take me 20 minutes and I would just be oh man, this dude was having chest pains and thing and we did EKG, and it would be some solid medical knowledge, usually a weird and quirky situation. Sometimes it was funny, sometimes it was tragic, a good anecdote, not a great story, but a good anecdote. And that's all people were coming to the blog for. It wasn't a novel. So, but I was man, this was easy. This is cool. And then I was if I just make it up, it'll be fiction. If I do that a lot, it'll be a novel. And if I throw in some ghosts, it'll be fantasy. It was such a revelation because I had put writing on a pedestal. You know what I mean? It was these special people write, and most of them are dead and white. This is the whole dun dun dun, the canon, right? The canon that they tell us about. Obviously, I knew there were lots of writers out there who weren't dead white men, but that's the thing. I had to get over that in my head because the canon of like, these are the great writers was so shoved down all of our throats. And like, there's a lot of them that I love as writers. Like, you know, I love Poe. Like, there's so many great, Shakespeare is my dude. And like, you know, just because I'm not dead and because I'm not white, I had to figure out also like, where do I fit into all this? And some of that was that realization was through like just the act of telling the story. And that's when I really was like, you know, the story is so important. And like, if we can trust the story, and if we just tell the story, like that's your job. Again, you tell the truth, but the truth is through the story, right? If you let the story tell the truth, there's so much that can happen. But if you get bogged down trying to write the perfect sentence, you'll never finish, and it won't be that good anyway.
That's really nice.
Oh, wow, I'm sorry. You're just, well, I'll have to start that project over. No, I'm kidding.
No, you keep going. That's what you do. You keep going. That's the idea.
Speaking of which, and sorry for you know, really jumping on the book Last Shots so much, but first of all, having little, you know, baby Ben Solo running there like butt ass naked.
That was one of my favorite scenes tonight.
It's just hilarious.
Uncle Webo.
But the themes of like fatherhood and how Han is trying to adjust to this indoor cat life, and then Lando, who's, you know, just always big pimping, is you know, catching feelings, right. And it's a unique story for each of those hugely iconic characters. Mm-hmm. That we haven't seen those stories before, yet you still captured the characters' individual voices going through that, and you're still playing within the sandbox of this universe. How the hell do you do? How do you get inside the mind of like such an iconic character and know where the limits are?
Right. Well, with the limits, like that's where Story Group comes in. Like that's their job, is to like limit you when you go like off the ranch, you know, and I knew that, so I knew I would get checked if I went too far. So I was like, all right, well, let's find out. There's definitely stuff in there that I did not think I would get away with, including the Gungan, but I did. Here we are, you know what I mean? But as far as like getting in their head, it is a challenge for sure, but also like it's a challenge I've literally been practicing for my whole life. Like I said, we had the action figures, man. Like, I've been doing their little voices in my head since I was 3. You know what I mean?
That is true.
That comes in handy. Like it turns out it does. I didn't know. Like I remember very, very clearly, like sitting down in a coffee shop in Denver, Colorado, because I was teaching at the Mile High MFA program at the time. It's called the Tattered Page bookstore coffee shop, and I sat down with my laptop, and I knew, you know, I had the deal was all sorted out, and I had like 3 months to write the book or something ridiculous like that. And I was just like, let's find out if this is going to work. And I just started. First of all, every time, especially that first time though, when you write Han Solo with your keyboard and you're like, this is the canonical moment. I still do that, especially because it's Yoda. You know what I mean? It's like, I'm writing Yoda. Like, but no, like, you know, I wrote that first scene to find out if I could do it, if it would work, or if I was gonna have to really like bend my mind around some weird technique to make it work. But at the end of the day, like with spoken lines, those actors are so iconic that if you can hear them say it, then you're probably on the right track. That's what it comes down to. If you can hear those actors say those lines, like, so that's kind of the guy, that's true north, you know, and beyond that, you just have to put them in scenarios and see what they'll do.
So you get like these big solid characters, you know, obviously, like you have, you guys have this brand new timeline, all this new stuff, and then you have Yoda as a tent pole sticking up in the middle. Exactly. Just fun. But with all the other characters, I'm curious how much of like yourself you put in them, or your friends and loved ones. Like, is there a character that is literally just you in the book? And
get some blood. No, I'm not that tall.
And additionally, do you have a favorite to write?
The answer is true of all the new characters I think that you make up, and even ones that you didn't make up, is that you're really like picking scraps of different people and kind of shoving them together into this weird Frankenstein in a blender. and it's very grotesque. That's kind of what it is, you know. It's like certain things will pique your interest as you're going about your life, and you'll be like, that's an interesting scenario. I wonder how that would play out, you know, if this was happening too. And you're just throwing these things together and seeing which one really jumps out at you. So, you know, like Zine's a great example. Zine isn't me, but I do know a lot of people who've grown up in different situations where they've been forced to suppress their power for various reasons, whether it's religious or cultural or just, you know, who knows? There's a million different reasons, or abusive situations, you know, like there's just people that don't feel comfortable being their truest self. In some ways, I think that's all of us. Like, life is kind of a journey of like taking some kind of responsibility and ownership of your own power on some level, whether it's political or physical or magical, you know, and spiritual. And so I wanted a character that had that complex relationship to the force, where she had it, it's with her, and she doesn't trust it because she hasn't been allowed to. And the people that are supposed to take care of her are also the people that are holding her back the most, because that's really scary and painful. And there's just so many people that are going through that in different ways. So knowing people who've been through that and continually meeting people who are going through that, I think it's also true as a writer. You know, I think we're always trying to unlock like our powers as writers. And I always say, because I heard it somewhere and I can't remember ever where, but someone told me once that the journey of writing a book is the journey of becoming the writer that is able to finish the book. Really, some Yoda shit, if we're being honest. And it's true. And I can tell you now, like 15 books in, it's true. For every single book, you have to become that new writer with every one who's going to be able to finish the book. And it's a different journey for each book, which is deep and also really dope, because we become better, like not just better writers, but better people, better humans as we do that. So yeah, you know, like it's like, that's an interesting subject, I think. And it's a really ripe one to talk about it, particularly in a comic, which is such a visual medium and which has so many opportunities for playing out different scenarios.
And you spoke earlier about your trials and tribulations, you know, going from the paramedics to, you know, a writer. And I do have to ask, since I am also writing an AU book for After the Rise of Skywalker, and this is one that's
what do you mean by AU? You mean like
alternate universe, basically?
Alternate universe. Okay.
Cool. I do.
Which he has fully voice cast too. I always like to point it out.
Would you call it fan fiction? Kind of.
I would, yeah.
Okay, cool. No, that's awesome. I love that.
But I do have to ask, on the topic of trials and tribulations, what is one piece or maybe two pieces of advice you would give to aspiring authors trying to get noticed? And what do you wish you had have known when you got started?
Yeah. Certainly the advice, which is also true of social media, that it's a marathon, not a sprint, is really crucial. And it's one of those things that it's a cliche, right? Like you hear it all the time, but like for me, every time I hear it, I'm like, oh yeah. And I like loosen up a little bit. It's like, it's just so easy to feel like you're in a hurry, you know what I mean? Especially not for nothing now, where like life feels very fragile. And like legacy takes on a different meaning in times of like mass death. You know, like the things we leave behind matter differently or feel different. And I understand the impatience and the urgency around trying to get stories out there, because I feel it too. But I think it's also really dangerous to kind of like rush things and try to like speed the process up or just be like, it's got to be like by this point, otherwise no. Like, again, you know, like for me, it took like a good 4 years and a very slow, gradual traction. And that's kind of a middle amount. I know writers who were going on for 10 years with nothing and then suddenly popped, you know, and then we're like nominated for major awards and all this other stuff. So it's like, it's keep at it, but it's also like keep growing. I think keep at it is kind of like a meaningless thing to say to someone, right? Like, it's like you do it because you love it, right? And you have to constantly refine that love as you're doing it. And like, there's going to be times when you don't love it, and that's okay, you know. And if you're not on deadline, then take advantage of the fact that you can put it aside and put it aside. Like I did a TikTok about it, and I have an essay up about it, that one of the things I really try to impart to all my students and to just anyone who listens is that writing every day is not some kind of magical key that like makes you a writer. Like it's not a good goal to set. It's not fair to yourself, and it's not realistic, and ableist, honestly. Like most people can't, you know, like, and I certainly don't. In fact, there have been 2019, like I did not write. I did. And I went into it knowing I wasn't going to, you know, and I was like in a position to get other jobs done and, you know, support myself when I needed to in different ways. And it worked out. It was hard, but it worked out. And like, I'm really glad I listened to myself, because burnout is really what stops you from writing, not missing a day of writing. Burnout does, shame does. And when you're like, oh gosh, I haven't written for a week or a month. And then you're like, whoosh. Like that's all that energy could be creative energy. You know what I mean? Like you could take all of that guilt and shame and BS that you're just putting yourself through, and you could actually use it to like write better stories and like enjoy the process, but instead you want to beat yourself up. It's terrible advice. And like, I'm still mad at Stephen King for putting it in On Writing, which is otherwise perfect book. I love that book so much. But like that telling people that is so unhelpful. Right, you know, just like it's like love writing, like find the thing you love about it. And yeah, sometimes you do it when you don't love it, for sure. And then the last thing I'll say is like keeping a journal is just like really foundational. It really helps me just like get crap off my chest and like focus myself, but also like tracking your own process is a major thing. Like I think that's the only way I'm able to like spit out books quickly, is because I understand my process very deeply, and I also know that it changes. It's a constant, like it's in what's that Yoda quote? The future, in constant
always
motion.
The future, always in motion. The future is.
I love that quote so much, and it's true. And like that's true of process too. Always in motion. Our processes are, because we're human. You know, like every project requires its own process, and if you're not checking in, and that's why like journaling is one really great way to check in. You will lose track of what's going on with your process, and again, burn out because you think you're supposed to be doing it this way, but it's really that way.
Yeah, I keep journals of the story I'm writing because it's so hard to keep track of everyone.
Yeah.
Like writing for like one or two characters, you're like, okay, you know exactly where they are at all times. But then I have like 10 plus characters, and I revisit them in a later chapter, and I'm just like, wait, what were they doing?
Right. Do you outline?
Yes, I do.
Oh, cool. I just started outlining this year, last year. Like, but it's like, try that with like 4 other writers all writing in the same world. Characters, look, man, that's where it gets really interesting. But again, it's fun because we'll literally just call each other. I called Charles the other day and I was like, bro, what happened with this one dude? And then, because I'm going to put him in the thing. And like, it was fun. I was like, this is like, it's like we're all each other's Wikipedias, you know?
Wow, that's such an awesome thing. I want you guys to be on speed dial as well.
Call Charles. I'll be like,
so now that you say that, I have to ask, you know, like what is it like working with these other writers? Because, you know, also specifically Claudia Gray, because I love her.
I too love her. It's great. They're all really great. We are all really different writers. And I think that's one of the things that makes the whole project sing, is that, like, first of all, shout out to Michael Sigley. Like, someone the other day, I did an interview yesterday or 2 days ago where they were like, is he like the Filoni or whatever? And like, that doesn't really work exactly, but I do think there's actually a comparison, more so in that one really amazing thing about Favreau is that he's let each director just have their own voice in The Mandalorian, but it still feels totally unified. And that is a magical thing. And that's been, you guys know, because you've been reading Star Wars publishing since Siglain came on, like, every writer gets to really have their own voice. You read Last Shot, like you realize, you've seen like that I was allowed to be me, but also be Star Wars. And that's what makes Star Wars so great. And that's what really, like, one of the genius things of Siglain is that he, you know, has brought in this, when he said in the Disney Insider thing, a very diverse group of writers, he wasn't talking about like race and gender. He was like, we are that too. But he really meant that we are diverse in our storytelling languages. But because we are really unified on like, you know, loving Star Wars and like, you know, getting this right, it works and it clicks, you know, in very different, weird ways. So that's what's so cool about it. I'm learning so much about storytelling, just like hearing all these different folks deal with their different story issues. It's fascinating, and we help each other through stuff. Claudia Gray specifically, like, we were friends before this, and as soon as we
You're both in New Orleans, right?
Yeah, we both live. Yeah, So as soon as we were both like, oh, we're doing this together? Oh, shoot. You know, we went to get a cup of coffee together and talk trash and be like, so what are we going to do? What are we going to do? And we were like, I don't know. We could do this. We could do that. You know, we just had no idea what it was going to be yet. It wasn't anything yet. We just knew we were doing a project together and it was going to be huge. We didn't know what it was going to be. So we check in all the time. Like, she's an amazing writer, obviously, but she's also just a great person, which is true of everyone.
And then one other, like when you're working with a story group, is there a guy standing right behind you watching you write and going, that's not how the force works? Like.
No, story group is awesome. They're great. They've been amazing. I don't know. I don't know how we would do it. They're just so, because again, like it's understanding the parameters in a way that like we don't look. To be a great, I feel like there's a misconception out there. Like to be a great Star Wars writer, it's not about knowing like every detail. Like having a Wikipedia in your brain doesn't make you a great Star Wars writer. And that's no shade to people who do. That's amazing that people do that. Like that's incredible. But being a great anything writer is about storytelling and understanding story, and like also being able to figure out what it is about Star Wars specifically that like that balance, right? I was talking about the force being in balance, but like the real balance for a writer is figuring out what's the balance of Star Wars. And the balance of Star Wars is ever shifting in a really interesting way, but within certain parameters. And I think that there's those moments where like, that was a really Star Wars moment. And hopefully those moments are like the whole thing, right? But the ones that aren't, like that was like those moments that take us out. I'm like, that wasn't Star Warsy at all. Like they feel really jarring. And those are like, and like, so as a writer, like you have to be alert for those moments coming. Like if you push the humor too far, where it just feels like this is all a joke, right? And I say that as a fan, like that's something that I love about Star Wars is that Star Wars can be hilarious, but never at the cost of the story, and never in a way where we're like, oh, nothing matters. This is all just a joke, right? Like it's funny, but it's funny within the realm of its story, right? And Star Wars can be dark, but never so dark that we're like, whoa, like it's never grim dark. It's just, it can get really, really dark. And so there's parameters, right? And when we start to push up against them, that's where having a team comes in handy, because people can be like, wait, I feel like this is going too far that way or whatever. That's our job to do for each other in that story group too.
So do you write past like an invisible boundary and then wait for them to kind of rein you in first?
I mean, I try not to. Right? I don't know. I don't know. It's all very sort of like theoretical and airy, I guess, when you talk about it. But it's sort of like a feeling thing. Like, no, when I'm writing, I'm really trying to be like, this is the Star Wars that I know and love. Like, wouldn't do this, but it would do this. So, how are we going to push it? At the same time, like, you do want to push borders, right? But you want to do it in a way that doesn't pull you out of the story. Right. And that's the ongoing challenge. It's a challenge in all fiction. You're always doing that, but when it's your own stuff, you get to create those boundaries. But you can still break your own boundaries. I've read books, and maybe I've written books, I don't know, but I've certainly read books where I'm like, like they set up this whole thing, and then they like, killed a whale or whatever. I don't know. That wasn't a book. I'm not trying to shade anybody. I haven't read a book where they killed a whale, but you know what I mean? Like it's a broken promise, and you can break promises in fiction, but you want to be very clear when you're doing it. And you want to do it for a good reason. You don't want to just accidentally kill a whale.
Yeah. That's powerful. I mean, it's about telling the truth. And so obviously if you break a promise, you're no longer telling the truth, and that's problematic.
Right. Right. And Mandalorian is the perfect example of it. Like they nail it every single episode. That was totally Star Wars, and that was totally also felt fresh and new. And I feel like that's sort of the mandate for any Star Wars work right now. It's like you want it to feel totally Star Wars, and you want it to feel really fresh and new at the same time.
Oh. And in my personal opinion is that the greatest art is actually created by boundaries. If you said make art, someone is going to decide, okay, I'm going to get a canvas and I'm going to do watercolors, right? And it might be jarring. I mean, it would still be art if I don't know, they macramade something in the middle of it, but but it's some of the boundaries that actually what creates the most compelling art. It's what you can do with
I think it's very true, and I definitely feel that way writing comics. Like it's so different than writing prose because you have these very, very clear parameters in a whole other way, and because it's an automatic team effort, right? And so, yeah, seeing the way that changes the storytelling is fascinating. And I just think it takes it in a really, really interesting direction. That's something I'm just loving so much right now.
Nice. Well, I mean, now that we're talking about your process, let's talk a little bit about projects you got coming up. I know we got Flood City.
Yeah.
You know, let's
Flood City. Yeah.
What can you tell us about it?
So Flood City is about a group of kids just trying to survive and fight off the invaders on the last city on Earth after floods have taken over. And the floods were caused by a group called the Chemical Barons, who mistreated the environment enough to cause floods, and then knew it was going to happen, so they escaped to space, and they've been orbiting the Earth in their little space station ever since. And now they're like, all right, now it's time to take back the Earth. So they come trying to cause trouble. There's a kind of an alien peacekeeper group that's around, but nobody likes them. There's a lot of different dynamics, and mostly it's about kids, joining together to save the world in lots of different ways. Because one of them is a holographer's daughter who's also a holographer, so she's really good at that stuff. There's one who's a trumpet player, and they're just kind of all over the map. But it's about really finding your own voice in terms of how to fight the power, basically.
I can't wait to jump into this book as well, and if it has any of the same style and flair, then I know it's gonna be good stuff.
Absolutely.
It's very Star Wars-y. My other middle grade series is actually done. I finished it last year. It's called Dactyl Hill Squad. So this is set during the Civil War era, but as you can see, there's dinosaurs running around. Obviously. So that's how the whole dinosaur thing happened on the whiteboard, the famous dinosaur incident on the High Republic whiteboard, is because I was writing this series at the time, and so I was obsessed with dinosaurs, like we all should be. And I just kept bringing them up as a joke, and then it became a joke. But yeah, this is really, it turned out to be very, very deeply historically researched. I got low-key obsessed with the Civil War even more than dinosaurs. And so it's all these really cool and weird little lost facts and kind of stories about the Civil War, especially about people of color, just doing a lot of the different amazing freedom fights that were going on in that era that just don't get talked about, for a lot of different reasons, like racism. So, so it's about kind of unearthing those stories and then having a group of kids be in the middle of those stories while riding pterodactyls.
You gotta ask, and you can feel free to gloss over as much as possible, but as we kind of discussed at the beginning, we know that there's a lot of pressures on working on Star Wars. The fans are very passionate. How do you deal with the criticism?
So I feel two things really strongly about criticism. I feel very passionately that communities, and Star Wars is a community, need critique to survive. I get really uncomfortable, and I'm saying this very genuinely, and I've been loud about this in other communities I'm in, when there's a sense that we can't critique. I also feel very strongly that we don't need to tag people in critiques.
Yes.
When we hate their work, I just don't need to know or be tagged into the negativity of you hating my work. But you have every right to hate my work, I really can tell you that I don't bring ego to this. Everybody has ego, and I certainly have feelings, and they can be hurt. So that's real. But I love seeing people engage with the work deeply, and the stuff. And this brings us back to TikTok, because quite honestly, just the stuff I've seen people talk about, it's not just that it's very positive, but even when I see people having negative reviews of stuff, it's so thoughtful, and I really love that. It makes me happy, even if it's about my friends or myself. I love seeing people engage with the work deeply, because that's how I engage with the work. There's stuff in Star Wars that I don't like, and I sometimes talk about it. Not always, but whatever. I think that's just part of being a fan, is and part of loving something is being able to critique it and be because it hurts when you love something and it doesn't go your way, or you're what the hell? I thought we were this and now we're that. It hurts. We all know that pain. So I empathize with that pain because I have felt it. You know what I mean? And then having said those two things, the other piece is homophobia, sexism, transphobia, racism. That's not critique. That's just you being an ass. You know what I mean? Those are very different things. And I think we all kind of know that. You know what I mean? So if someone's just being like phobic on some level. You know, that's not critique. That's not what I'm talking about here. Gatekeeping isn't critique. You know what I mean? Like, and like, you know, I'm sure people can manipulate those lines in lots of different ways and claim lots of different things. But I think at the end of the day, like, people kind of know what they're doing. And I've seen a fair share of the whole range of those things in my mentions on Twitter. And I can honestly tell you, I say this too, because I just don't want people, I know, like, I think I'm the only Star Wars, at least High Republic writer on TikTok. And I really don't want people to be like, oh man, Daniel's on here, he's gonna see this, and I wasn't into that X, Y, and Z, and what's he gonna think? And like, I'm just gonna be like, I really respect your opinion. I might even agree with it, you know, who knows? So I just don't want people to be like, oh, he's not gonna like this, or he's gonna feel away, or whatever. Like, I don't know, maybe they won't care, but they shouldn't be creating that image. I feel like critique is one of the lifebloods of community. It's hard, but it's good.
And it's one of the larger, you know, goals that we had as creators in the Star Wars community, because there's a lot of backlash and a lot of negativity surrounding, you know, the sequel trilogy. And something that we wanted to do, Chaco and I, in our content, is acknowledge the flaws, critique the movies, but at the end of the day, once we've acknowledged them, right, we're not sitting there, you know, obsessed with it and not moving on.
Right.
We have critiques and we have our own issues with the movies, but I'm not going to sit here and cry about the movie constantly. And it always bothers me when someone calls me like a shill, or someone who just loves, well, even if I just loved all of Star Wars, why would that be a problem? But right. but no, it's I'm like, it bothers me because I'm not a shill. I'm like I do have my issues with all of these movies and all these books.
Yeah.
But I largely choose to enjoy it at the end of the day.
Right. And also, like, there's stuff in there that's not for you, and that's cool. And you don't watch it. You know what I mean? Like, it's literally for little children. Like, you don't need to watch that. And that's not you dissing it. You know what I mean? And you don't need to, whatever. You know what I mean? Like, that's how I feel about it. Is that, I agree with you, though, because someone said in my mentions the other day, like, oh, you guys just hate anybody that critiques Disney. And I was like, I critique Disney. Yes. You know? Disney should pay Alan Dean Foster. Like, we have problems with each other. It's not, you know, like, we have gripes and things. There's things I don't like about different things. You can find me critiquing Disney on the timeline after I started writing Star Wars. It's all there. And sometimes those critiques happen behind closed doors. That's also a thing. Like, sometimes people have come, there's calling out and there's calling in. And look, who's to say which is appropriate when? I don't know. I don't have those answers. Each person can only do what they do. But I will say that just because you don't see someone yelling about something, that doesn't mean they're not actually making change behind closed doors sometimes. And that's something to take into account. But also, yeah, people use the word shill when they don't have anything better to say to your critique.
Yeah, pretty much.
It's one of my favorite, because like there are, you know, even some of the films that I don't like, but I'll get asked a question about it, and so I'll answer it. I'm like, so you think it's perfect? I'm like, no, I didn't say that.
Only sit still in absolutes.
Yeah, that's his favorite fallacy right there. The "so you're saying" one.
Yeah.
Which is the most hilarious line in all of Star Wars. I feel like they wrote that unironically. Like, I don't. Does it? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I mean,
did he not realize that there was a play going on there?
I you know, the way I reconcile it is that he meant to say such absolutes. He just
messed up.
Yeah.
It's a hilarious line. I don't know how hilarious it is, but it's iconic. I love it. Yeah. But yeah, you know, there's so much material too. Like, you can genuinely hate some stuff and still love Star Wars so much, which is obviously what's going on. Like, I guess that's why fans are at beef so much, is because it's like, I genuinely love this, but I genuinely hate that. My soul is torn. It sucks. You know, we've all been there.
So I do have one final question. You have free reign on any time period, any character, any story in Star Wars. What do you write? And this could be a long or short answer.
it's such a great question, and I just struggle with it constantly. I really want to do. Because I'm a musician, and because The Godfather and Casablanca are maybe my two favorite movies. I just really want like more underground material from Star Wars, which I'm really excited about. The Boba Fett show,
Yeah,
and The Mandalorian gives us a lot of that. I love that show. But yeah, I would just love like a behind the music. You know, but like with like a bunch of different bands, some of whom we know, some of whom we don't, like just like, but like in the underworld. Just,
Okay.
yeah, I love gangster stories so much in general, and I just think it's such a ripe area to explore.
so kind of like the Gilded Cage singer in Nar Shaddaa, almost.
Yeah. Yes, Nasha, that would be a great thing.
Yeah, I'd watch the heck out of that. I mean,
It all comes back to Jabba's palace. You know, again, like that's my favorite scene, and there's so much culture in that scene. And it's like, it's also like, I feel like we always get these scenes from like the guy walking in being like, whoa, this is so weird. But as the musician, like I've been the guy who's like, is in the seat playing the music. You know what I mean? And like, I always want to like see those stories from the point of view of the people who are like the barfly, like is always there, and it's not always being like, oh wow, it's a weird place, but like this is my place, this is my home. You know what I mean? Like this, I think that's a fascinating idea to explore.
you know what? Actually, I mean, so this is what was it? Last year they did a book from a certain point of view, A New Hope.
Mm-hmm.
This year they did from a certain point of view Empire Strikes Back.
Mm-hmm.
Are you getting a story from a certain point of view Return of the Jedi? Because you
we
need
haven't
to
even talked about it yet, but that's hopefully, I don't know, we'll see.
I'm just saying, if anyone's going to take a random bystander from the palace,
no, if I do it, it would be hard for me not to do someone in Jabba's palace, and that's obviously the richest. Like, there's so many characters there. I did the last two, and that's how I started in Star Wars, was through the first certain point of view. That was my first story for Star Wars, and that's a charity gig. They don't pay you for that. They give the money to charity, which is dope. And I was like, I will write for Star Wars for free. Absolutely. Yeah, of course I will. My agent had to hold me back from like writing a novel for free, basically. Don't write novels for free. That's my other writing advice. Short stories is one thing. I don't even do that unless it's like Star Wars or a really, really good cause. I try to not write for free because it's my job. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Exposure isn't it, but Star Wars does give really good exposure. Like something like that, it was also very strategic. Like I knew if I wanted to write a novel in Star Wars, which I did, it was going to start here, and it did. But also, I really enjoyed writing that story, and I really do love Dubaks.
And how hot it is on the Tatooine desert. Yeah.
Hot it is. Sand.
What has been Fortuna?
I do want that character to come back, Sardis Ramson, because he's in Last Shot. And then we see him like, on Tatooine, and then he just like, spoiler, runs off into the desert, rides off into the desert. In my head canon, which is actual canon, I guess, he becomes like a desert messiah, and like, has a whole other weird quasi-religious life out somewhere on Tatooine. But
yeah, I'm gonna need that.
Yeah.
As well. Shoot. Also, another side question, since you're a musician, as am I, and
oh, cool. What do y'all play?
That was my question for you.
Well, you start.
Electric guitar.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I've been playing the drums for 15, 20 years now.
Oh shoot, that's great.
But some guitar, some piano, some bass, just mess around. I also just did a Maul rap, a rap for Darth Maul on TikTok. So if you have beats that you've made,
wow.
I'll.
Oh yeah, you know the one I put up with Mandalorian and Ray mixed up, right?
Sorry, what was that?
I put up one on TikTok already. I remixed the Mandalorian.
Oh, that was you? Okay, I didn't realize that was yours.
Oh yeah.
I did see that. Okay.
Yeah, I was like, I did this. This was me. I guess I didn't say it clearly. I'll say it the next time. But I haven't done those for years. That was my first time coming back to the beats for a long time. And it's extra ironic for people on Twitter when I went and posted that, because also like a running joke on Twitter is, because my Twitter name is DJ Older. So I always get tagged in these like horrific spams of people being like, "Oh, the DJs, you gotta play this track. Here's my SoundCloud link." I'm like, you guys, calm down. Like, I'm just untag me, please. You know, it's my initials. That's it. But so I'm always like, I'm not a DJ. But everyone's like, I really thought you were a DJ for so long. First of all, what kind of actual DJ name is DJ Older? Like, come on, do I play nursing homes? Like, but second of all, here I come now, 10 years into telling people I'm not a DJ, dropping a track on Twitter and talking about, hey, I remixed Ray's theme with the Mandalorian theme song. Give it a listen. Like someone who should be tagged in spam. So that was hilarious. But no, yeah, I love doing beats. I just really haven't. I've been so focused on writing, and I really put music to the side. I still play for fun. Like, I just play guitar because I love playing guitar. Bass was my main instrument, mostly because it's what I'm good at. Like, there's too many notes on a guitar. Mainly what I wanted to do with music was writing. And so bass was the best way for me to like play with the band and let them do the heavy lifting in terms of like playing the notes, and I could just sit back and like, you know, keep the bass line going. But yeah, I love composition. I studied composition in Cuba, actually, and with Yusef Lateef at Hampshire. When I was a student there, Yusef Lateef was like one of the great jazz dudes, and he was teaching at my college. And I was just like, well, I guess I better learn theory so I can take advantage of this situation. So I just like crammed on theory for a semester, took his class, and I just did the best I could. That was way out of my league. But yeah, so yeah, bass is my main instrument. I'm trying to learn piano right now. It's not going very well because I've been so distracted with some. Yeah. But I now that I'm on TikTok, I feel like I'm gonna do more music. TikTok is such a great lo-fi world. You know, like you don't have to have like the highest of quality and everything. You can just be like, yo, I wrote this song. Like, you know, do what you will with it. Swing some lightsabers. Let's do this.
Yep. Yeah. Like I didn't think I would be playing on TikTok, but there are moments where, you know, Darth Choco or Brandon brings me to the mix with his guitar, and I'm just like, I have to do what? I have to do this, you know? And
yeah, man, it's such a cool aspect of it. I mean, the sea shanty thing is obviously like what the national media has suddenly latched onto for whatever reason.
Yeah.
That's very like indicative of what's so great about TikTok, which is that it is at its heart a collaborative app that allows people to just like put songs together across the world, and that's incredible. I love it.
Yeah, there's another Star Wars creator that was like, forget, you know, sea shanties, we're doing space shanties.
Oh yeah, what's his name?
Star Killer.
Yeah,
yeah.
There's so many good folks out there. I got on TikTok and I just immediately started finding these great people, and I was like, everyone's so like nice and thoughtful, but again, like critical, like has really interesting critiques of stuff, which I love. And I tell you, it makes me so happy genuinely just to see people be like, you know, this didn't work, but here's how it could have worked, or I thought about this or whatever, you know. And then like and Shanley, and like there's just the kids with their lightsabers, and they're not kids, they're in their 20s, but you know what I mean. Like it's just so like hard. I feel like this old man just like, oh, look at all these oh geez, it just and I'm all crusty from Twitter, you know what I mean?
You've been in the trenches for so long.
Twitter, and just like
this is what we were fighting for.
Like, PTSD. I would get notifications on TikTok, and I'd be like, oh, what's this going to be on the, you know, video about Taka or whatever, and it's just like, wow, I really appreciate this. Thanks so much for talking about your process. And I'm like, what world am I in? Like, what planet am I falling on to? Like, even the guy that was like, there's one person on that video right now who's like, no hate, but I just don't see why, whatever. And like, I disagree with him, you know what I mean? But like, even he is like trying to be really respectful. Like, and I'm just like, this is so different. And again, like, Twitter is great. Like, it is my hometown team. Like, I've found a lot of love on Twitter, and I've really cultivated like a great community on there, and I love it. But it's a constant battle also to like just deal with people that I don't love, who very aggressively don't love me.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to say, like, thank you so much for being willing to. I just was like, oh, maybe you'll let us interview you, and you're like, sure. And I was like, I mean, that was easy.
Like I said, I was probably.
You mean I could just ask?
I was probably supposed to check in. Like, I'm going to do that after the fact. You know what? I probably should have told my publicist about this. But sorry, Lisa. I will tell you Come on.
I mean, we tried really hard to be, respectful of your time and not reveal anything. So hopefully that's
really fun. I had a great time. And look, like I said, I'm brand new on TikTok, so it'll be great to just talk to new people about the stuff we talked about.
Just for the viewers and listeners at home, do you have any closing remarks? If you'd like to plug any of your projects like Flood City or your socials?
Oh, you know what I didn't mention? The series I'm best known for that started my whole career is Shadow Shaper, and it's a YA trilogy. There's also 2 novellas that are just on ebook that are like $1 each. It's Shadow Shaper, Shadow House Fall, and Shadow Shaper Legacy, which came out last year. Man, it came out a year ago, almost to the day. That wraps up the trilogy. It's about a Puerto Rican girl in Brooklyn who finds out she's part of a magical legacy of spirit workers who can bring art to life by putting spirits into them, and then has to fight off a deranged Columbia anthropologist who's trying to take over her powers. And it's an exciting series. I'm really proud of it. So that the IDW series, as you said, launches on February 3rd. Flood City comes out on February 2nd. It's going to be a busy week. And that IDW series is an ongoing monthly series. So throughout the next year, it's going to be dropping and beyond. And there's other stuff. Oh, Race to Crash Point Tower comes out this summer. I will say this about Race to Crash Point Tower. I don't think people realize. It along with the Rising Storm, Cav's book, the second Del Rey book, those 2, to my knowledge of what we've seen so far, those are the most deeply intertwined of the books that are coming out. In terms of the story, they don't just happen at the same time. They literally pass each other in different moments, which is it was really hard to write and really, really amazing. And I feel like that's the cool thing about Star Wars that so many people love, and that's one of the things about the High Republic I think that really pops is that there's all those little moments where you're like, oh, this is that guy from that thing, and because it's not people writing 30 or 40 years apart from each other. It's people writing literally at the same time. We get to be they actually link up in really fascinating ways. And Race to Crash Point Tower and The Rising Storm are the epitome of that in terms of coordination, which is what's gonna be the vibe moving forward. It's almost like there's a convergence happening, which is really, really cool. And that's something I'm just really excited for readers to get into, because people have already been really cool about reading all across the different genres. Folks are going to be peeping all these little things in there, oh, this dude did that, and then that happened over here. It's someone's going to map it all out. And that's what I love about Star Wars fans is it's passion, but it's also folks just getting really nerdy about stuff in really cool ways, and the physics video. You know what I mean? Making it all make sense and putting the pieces together and realizing that it doesn't always make sense. That's so great. That's why we're the greatest fandom. And it's all love,
Yeah, I mean, my favorite piece of just random thing, and it's been mentioned by a few people now, but just how shooting a panel is different every time. Sometimes it locks the door, sometimes it opens the door, sometimes
that's so true. Oh my god,
it's an all-purpose. Oh, just shoot that panel. I don't know.
Let me plug something before I forget too. I have a class up on a website called SkillShare. That's I have 2 classes up actually, and they're basically fundamentals of writing. One of them is fundamentals of writing, and one of them is about starting out, beginnings, how to make a beginning work. And Skillshare is actually a really cool platform, and it's one of those ones where I feel like it's a pretty monthly thing or something, and you can just mine all of that material. And lots of great writers have classes up there, and then not just writers, tons of different people have different stuff. So I can send y'all a link to that. Actually, it's in my email. If you check my email signature.
Oh, it is in the. Oh, it's in the signature. Okay, cool. Yeah.
Yeah, if you want to throw that link up there, that'd be super great. Because that really does have the very most straightforward basics of writing that I teach, and it's an hour-long class. That was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed myself.
The same.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a blast.
Again. Let's definitely do it again. This time I'll check in with my publicist.
Yes.
Wouldn't get in trouble. Yeah, it would be great. Cool. All right, y'all.
All right. Yep. We'll give you back your Saturday night. You have a good one.
All right. Take care.
Yeah, that was a great interview. We just wanted to thank Daniel José Older for participating and, you know, just spending his precious time with us. You know, everyone's very busy, especially someone who's writing for Star Wars.
And I'm not gonna lie, some of his writing tips are just golden. Like he blew my mind several times in this, and I'm legitimately gonna sign up for his Skillshare class.
Same. Yeah. But moving on to part 3 of A Test of Courage, we now have the crux of this whole journey, where the perpetrators, they have arrived, right? They're trying to track down this one shuttle that has escaped from the Steady Hand. And it's a couple of jobbers from the Nile, some strikes who were given a job. They failed the job. And wouldn't you know it, one of the things that they did earlier on their landing on Vivo would actually cause them to be stranded, because was that Imri or Vernestra who used like a force push, and the rock kind of just fell on their ship.
Yeah,
and disabled
that was
them.
a great moment, because I have this theory that all of Star Wars is just about teaching. And there's that moment where Vern is trying to get Imri to move the rock, and he cannot do it. And in the last minute, she has to sort of shove it out of the way, which results in this shuttle getting stranded.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like when you watch Rogue One and Chirrut kind of recontextualizes the Force when he says, "All is as the Force wills it," and then just walks out and just does not get shot. And I think it's largely because, you know, when you trust the Force, you find out that its will is working through you, and so nothing is going to happen to you that doesn't need to happen, right? And so you're kind of enacting its will, and whether you succeed or not, it doesn't really, you know, you do affect the outcome in some way, but of course it was always the will of the Force. It was unless you seek to bend it to your will, and that kind of throws it out of balance. But yeah, it's kind of like this, you know. He's trying to push it. Vernestra has to kind of give him a nudge or a helping hand, and that was the will of the Force. He was like, yeah, this was going to happen all along. And
in my experience, there's no such thing as luck.
Yes.
And we also get some of that in Light of the Jedi too, when how Avar talks about the Force. You know, the Force is trying to show me something, I don't know what it is, and she pushes to look for it and realizes, oh no, that's not how the Force works, and sets back, relaxes, you know, goes back into her network and lets someone else find it. But it's the same deal, because, you know, I also don't want it to sound like we're saying that the Force equals fate.
Yeah.
No, it's that the Force has a direction. It's like a river, and it's going in this direction. And this direction is towards life for the galaxy at large. That's what it wants to happen. Now, it's up to you to listen and actually do go there and do the thing. And, you know, life at large will be successful, even if you meet your demise. But it didn't get that dark this time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, the Force itself would not be thrown out of balance if it had the power to act on its own will. So it needs these actors, it needs these people to listen to it, which is something I like to point out a lot. Is like, you know, it's not fate if you have to listen to it first and choose to act on it. But in this particular act of the book, you know, Vernestra, Imri, Avon, Honesty, J6, they find the Nile, but Imri, after figuring out or finding out that these Nile are responsible for the Steady Hand, they're also, by proxy, responsible for the loss of his master. So, dark thoughts pervade his mind, and he goes down this path. And this is an amazing journey in this book. And I would love your thoughts, Fern, on this sort of path to the dark side for Imri, and Vernestra's part in bringing him back.
Yeah, it was one of those surprising yet inevitable endings for me, that both parts of it, that Imri would be led to this place of anger, and also that he would be brought back from it by Vern. I think it was really interesting how much he and Honesty were sort of propelling each other forward, and there was a lot of talk about what they should be feeling. We should be feeling anger because something was taken from us, because this is unfair. And neither one were really committed to that anger. They were confused, they were upset, but they were propelling each other forward in this, well, you need to be angry so that we can act on this, which I found fascinating, because I think in general, emotions are more complex than just anger. They're a mix of things, and we saw that here. I don't know yet what I think about Vernestra sort of bringing Imri back. It felt inevitable to me. It felt very satisfying to me. But it's a scene I sort of want to revisit and read again, because I think I need a second look at it.
I love how you say that, though, how, those feelings of anger and whatnot are a lot more complex. I feel like we're always so focused on this end goal, right? What comes out of the black box. But the inner workings of the black box is the thing, like instead of looking at the byproduct, we need to understand the mechanisms at place that give birth to said byproduct. But I also found it really interesting how without Honesty there being actively angry, he wasn't able to maintain that darkness.
Yeah.
And I think that was a really interesting connection. And then of course, we find out a little bit more about what it takes to fall to the dark side.
Yeah. And this is something that the book does very, very well. And it recontextualizes the dark side a lot, because throughout our learnings of Star Wars and throughout history, we've always known that it was the quicker and easier path, but we've never known it to be in the context that it is not powerful. In this case, without the presence of emotions, at least from Honesty, it completely failed him. And it's interesting to bring that out when people. I know you guys on TikTok and on social media who are huge purveyors of the Sith religion. You're just not going to be that powerful if I come in next to you and start being happy. Your power will diminish, and you will be powerless. But
it's also an interesting. I feel like this is also a parallel to the fan base as well, because I've met people that were just really like mean and mad and adamant, and I hate this because of this, and this, and I'm like, oh, yeah, that's a totally valid reason to hate it. Don't you dislike that I hate it? No. I mean, all I do is share canon facts. I don't ever police people's opinions. That would be stupid. Oh, and as long as if I'm not giving that anger back, which I don't. I mean, I don't have that in my heart. Just in general, people calm down and I don't know. It's fascinating. Mm-hmm. But yeah, we find out in this that going to the dark side is intentional. Mm-hmm. And I thought that message was really powerful because, we have seen people fall. And this has actually been a through line throughout all of Star Wars. And for some reason, I've never actually connected the dots. Dooku fell to the dark side intentionally. Anakin chose the dark side. He knelt down and chose to become Palpatine's apprentice. It was his choice. Quinlan Voss chose to learn the dark side because he thought it'd give him a better edge against Dooku. And again, using it may end up putting you in a frame of mind where you're not thinking reasonably enough, but it's still a choice.
Yeah. And this arc has some of my most favorite quotes, which I don't have them by me. But the first quote is them saying that, of course, we deal with anger. Being a Jedi isn't about not being angry, not having those emotions. It is about acknowledging its presence and its necessity for equilibrium, but not giving into it. Because there's this perception that Jedi can't get angry. Well, no, they can. They get angry. But,
they do all the time.
Yeah, it's just whether or not they act on that anger. And then the second quote, which is something that Chaco has been pointing out, is the path to the dark side is deliberate. The path of a Jedi is choosing light over and over again, and that recontextualizes Obi-Wan when he's talking to Maul. It takes strength to resist the dark side, and those who oppose it are more powerful than you can ever be. Do you have something to say? You looked like you were getting ready to say something.
No, I mean, it's just like you said. It's a series of choices. It's not a one-day decision. This is not Batman: The Killing Joke, where it just takes one day to push someone over the edge.
Oh, that's what they do say, right? It's deliberate, and it's not a series of bad days.
Yes. I couldn't remember the quote exactly, and I figured you did, so I was trying to prompt that. But yeah, and so once that is put together, then again, the whole message of Star Wars is that your past does not define you. Which is, Vader, who had lost everything to the darkness, including himself. Vader lost Anakin Skywalker to the darkness. And when he saw his son being tortured, he chose the light. And you have to make those choices. And of course, that doesn't absolve him of all of his war crimes and stuff. And that's why when people are like, what would have happened if he had survived? Like, it would have been hella awkward for a lot of people. That's what would have happened. He would have been in prison forever.
Yeah. Same thing with the Ben Solo deserved better, and she should have been Rey Palpatine, and all of Hitler's family should have been alive today, parading the name.
We're taking it back. No, you're not. You can't even have that mustache. Nope. That mustache is gone.
I mean, and it used to be, associated with Charlie Chaplin, but not anymore.
I love that it's framed as a choice. This is something that I love about the Jedi, because, I'm a Jedi apologist and always will be.
I love your videos, by the way.
Thank you. Thank you so much. But I really love the Order, even in the prequels era, even when it's clear that they are not being who they are meant to be. I see them as this institution that is extremely flawed, but all institutions are flawed. And a group of people who are trying to make the right choice, not always succeeding in that. But to be told here so directly that the light side is a choice, it's a choice you make over and over and over again, is just so beautiful.
Yeah, and it makes that choice even more impactful, because it's not like you join the Order as a youngling, and then Yoda's like, do you choose the light? And then the youngling goes, yes, and then they're immune and impervious to all, adversity from there. They've made their choice. They can't. And it has to chip away.
Luke chose the light, and so he would never fall after 30 years, right? That could never, you would never run into any problems again after you've resisted the temptation, right? Yeah, but Anakin passed his trial and became a knight. He had temptation, right?
Yeah.
That your trial is, yeah, and afterwards he still fell, and so again, I love what this does to explain Star Wars, and I feel like they're trying to give us exactly what we need to understand, because there's all these weird, like, biased viewpoints out there right now that don't contain, I guess, the soul of the story, the purpose of it.
Yeah. And so this was I really want to see like a live action or an animated version of this book, just because Renestra, and just because they had a duel. Emery and Renestra had a duel with the lightsaber whip, and I want to see how she used it and how she trounced him. You know, you don't know the power of the dark side. And she said, "Sit down, kid."
Sit down. Be humble.
Yeah. That was just a great moment. I really, I had some like hesitations with Emery, and primarily because he had started his fall with a forced choke, and that's never a good sign. But luckily, Douglas showed up in a force residual voice. Do we have any lore abilities that match this? Because they don't have Force Ghost at this point. It hasn't been unlocked.
No.
That's all he's gonna say.
No, that's all. No, I mean, who knows? I mean, maybe because of their relationship, and maybe because of how often Emery had doubts, he did something where he could, kind of leave him some messages, or leave him some encouragement through the Force. Or we also have it contextualized that a lot of these Jedi have very unique gifts that are unique to them, and who knows if maybe that was just something that he manifested himself through the Force, being of someone that he knows very well. I mean, there's a lot of possibilities. I'm curious to see how and if it gets expanded on.
I mean, one possibility is that they do know Force Ghost, and that knowledge wasn't passed down.
Entirely possible as well.
I mean, I did say all these Jedi in the High Republic are just Qui-Gons.
I mean, I loved how Daniel said in the interview that, hey, this is a time of peace. That means that and we know that they are going to end up going to battle. And once they do go to battle, then yes, their knowledge of the Force and understanding of preparation and training is going to be more centered around combat and martial, right? But they're coming from a time of just straight up peace. What are they spending their time training on? They're all probably researching, accessing, they're trying to think about the Force in different ways that no one has, and expanding on things. So it's certainly possible.
Just very curious about what the future holds for these two characters. I think there's like the little kid inside me who's so excited that they have this partnership now, and that they have this relationship now. And then there's the current me who's, an adult and a teacher and thinks that it's going to be quite difficult for this 16-year-old to take on this mentorship role, because though she is talented, she's 16, she's a kid. yeah, I'm really curious to see what the future holds for them.
Yeah, it also is, I think in their journeys together, this also may contextualize Obi-Wan's relationship with Anakin as well, because Obi-Wan was not he was not prodigious. He almost like aged out. He was always a bridesmaid before getting picked up by Qui-Gon, and then nearly lost Qui-Gon, and then picked up a Padawan the same day.
Yeah, he was a Padawan, but knighted from that encounter.
And the second he was knighted, he was like, "Oh yeah, I'm picking my Padawan," and he's like, "No, you can't do that." It's like, I mean, it's done. So like, oh, okay, whatever. So I think that this might contextualize that. We have a master and their apprentice that are closer in age than Anakin and Padme were, than Han Solo and Leia were, and Anakin and Obi-Wan were. Like, it's peers. It's you know, it's just interesting.
I'm wondering, Fern, if you can give us some insight being a teacher, because correct me if I'm wrong, you are a 12th grade English teacher, and
yes.
So like what's the insight on in teaching or being a mentor kind of figure to people who are at least closer to you in age than, say, a kindergarten teacher?
Yeah, it's weird. It starts off weird. I'm pretty close in age to my students. I'm 24. Most of them are 17 or 18 years old. And there does come this point where you don't see the age difference. You see the fact that they're your students and they're learning, and they're at a very different place in their lives emotionally, which I think Vernestra and Imri are at very different places in their lives emotionally. And so, you know, that in another context, the age difference would be almost nothing at all. My brother is 19, so, you know, I interact with people his age in a totally different context all the time. But when I'm in my classroom, it's not, oh, you're 5 years younger than me. It's, you're my student, and you're here to learn. And
so it's like, shut up, learn. You're in my house.
Not quite, but in theory, yes.
Yeah, this is definitely an interesting story, and it ends with Imri being Vernestra's Padawan, and this is where I think you know, the story goes from here. I think the High Republic Vernestra is her being master to Imri, and I would love that book if it were maybe an adult novel. I mean, they're both approaching adult age, you know, Vernestra even more so, but if there is like a time jump in between novels, because we have Into the Dark, we have Edge of Balance in summer, there's a lot of these books are coming out and have already been slated throughout the year. And so I'm wondering if there should be a time jump and we see Vernestra when she's like 18 and Imri when he's, I forgot how old Imri is in relation to Vernestra, but
I think he's 14. Yeah, I think they're 2 years apart.
So that would be kind of cool. I mean, exploring Imri when he's in his 16 years old. That's like Anakin, I hate sand type of feelings.
Yeah, no one likes being 16.
I certainly didn't.
Me neither.
I mean, I did, but that's okay.
So let's start us off with the conclusion of this story, Chaco. Where do you think the story goes from here? If there is going to be a sequel to Vernestra's and Imri's story, what could they possibly do?
I mean, there is absolutely going to be a sequel to their story. First off, I think we are going to get more Avon and Honesty, because they are each other's first and only friends. In obnoxiously cute way. But I hope we get more of them, and maybe through Honesty's resources and things, she's going to get a lot more toys to play with. And we have the dangling thread of she has a lightsaber. It's broken, but if someone else is going to fix it, it's going to be her. And maybe we're going to see a weird J6 droid that has lightsaber attachments next time.
A Jedi training droid.
Yeah, so there's a lot of possibilities over there. I don't know that we'll have them run into our two Jedi again, but they're going to have some interesting adventures as well as a unique bond with one another. And I hope to see that carry forward in future stories, you know?
I know what I'm hoping to see, and I don't know if it is what we will see. But I want to see Vernestra and Imri in just normal Jedi business. Like, this was obviously a disaster. It was unexpected. It was this tragedy, and that's what the narrative focuses around. I want to see them studying at the temple. I want to see them going on these missions where obviously there will be conflict and tension, because that is what makes a good story. But I want to see what it looks like to be a young Jedi Knight and a Padawan in this era.
Absolutely. Like, it's the most interesting and fun perspective to be engulfed in. Just the thoughts and the minds of these people who are still learning. And, you know, we often think about how it would be from the perspective of being a Jedi Master in the temple. Would it be interesting? Like, no, they're literally kind of just meditating and you know, self-reflection is a large part of their day. And I like how you called out Siri Tachi. This is just a quick aside. Siri Tachi from Secrets of the Jedi. Shout out to Save the Ewoks for her Siri Tachi cosplay.
Yes.
I saw that pink lightsaber and I was like, you need to do Siri Tachi. And wouldn't you know it, she came out with her Siri Tachi yesterday, and that's all I saw was Siri Tachi. I wasn't seeing anybody else. But sorry, back to the point.
And also shout out to bringing some of these beloved characters into canon for the first time. Mm-hmm. And contextualizing about Obi-Wan having feelings, like touching Siri Tachi's hand in the Jedi lunchroom when they were kids. Like, yeah, it's adorable.
Yeah, I love that from a certain point of view story. So like for me personally, where does this story goes? I love both of your guys' outlooks. Definitely want to know more about their studies, what it means to be a Padawan and a knight. Like, what business do you handle? What adventures or what missions are you called on? And what entails actual study? You know, in the Clone Wars, we got the Gathering, and that was cool and all, but what exactly are you doing leading up to that? What are you learning? Because what we got in the films and the prequels was blinders, helmets, deflecting, you know, these droids, but we never really dive deep into their classes or what a knight would be teaching his Padawan specifically. So I want to see that. And on Chaco's point, I want to see Avon and Honesty and J6 join them, because what I see is another Rebels type of show where it's Vernestra, Imri, with Avon, Honesty, and J6 in their own little ghost ship, and it's like the adventures of the Padawan adventures, you know. And it's just, I see so much story and narrative potential surrounding Vernestra and Imri's relationship, as well as Avon and Honesty's relationship, and then both of their relationships colliding and having that dynamic as well, where both of their different relationships create another relationship. And I feel like I'm saying relationship way too much, but this is the pitch that I'm doing right now. It's a show about these children and these kids who escaped steady hand, came out of it better people, Vernestra coming out of it a master to a Padawan, and who knows what adventures lie in their future. But one thing is for sure, the angle of Imri's dark side tendencies will definitely play a role in future stories. You know, as they say, it continues to haunt them, and they continually have to reject it.
And hard prediction, she's gonna fall to the dark side next time.
Ooh. I like that.
And he's gonna be the one person who understands what that's like, and he's already lost a master once, and he's not gonna let it happen again, but he is going to have to somehow be able to defeat her at Darkside Vern.
I thought you said Darkside Fern.
My final form.
I mean, I would like to see him defeat that as well.
I mean, by the way, I did not ask you here on this podcast because Vern and Fern. It was just a complete coincidence. You know, I loved your videos and how you were talking about compassion and informed consent, and just I needed you on the podcast. But I would like for you to speak on what you think a dark side Vern would look like and how that would play out.
It would have to be, I think, a really drawn out arc. I would want to see these moments where she is called to the dark side and is able to reject it, but something changes in her life and we just see her get closer and closer to that point until she reaches some sort of breaking point. Because I think the character as she exists right now, I can't imagine her falling to the dark side. She seems so grounded. She seems, so sure, not sure of herself because she is full of doubts, but sure in her identity as a Jedi, which I think makes for the best kind of fall to the dark side if it's done tactfully and if it's done carefully. So I would want to see this long drawn out, just one thing after another that leads to this fall.
I mean, what if she's such a prodigy and all of those things have always come easy for her? And so it makes me think of my actual sister. My sister is the most talented human I've ever met in my entire life. Like, that's no joke at all. I play music, sure. She's 1,000 times the musician I am. I played basketball. She's better than me at basketball. Made it to all the way down to an NBA 2-ball, which was a thing in like 2002, to the finals. And so we all got to go down and play on the court at Arco Center in Sacramento.
Nice.
During the 2002 Kings. I don't know if you know what that means. That's a special time. We don't talk about it, but it was a special time.
Is that the Bibby Kings?
Yes, that's the whole Lakers debacle and the worst officiated game in history. Anyways, sorry, going off, but I wanted to learn how to skateboard. She picked up a skateboard, did a pop shove it. I was like, the hell? And then like a week later, she was doing heel flips. I was like, oh. But her being a prodigy at all of these things led to her downfall, because there's a lot of stuff that she never had to work for, and so when she would hit with things, she couldn't deal with them. And I think that might be an interesting foil to this character. Maybe something happens and she can't overcome it no matter what. And I've never experienced, she's like, I've never experienced this before. And maybe if she thinks, well, I remember what he did, and he did gain some confidence and some power. Maybe that's what I need to choose to get through this situation. And then I'll reevaluate after that, because, because we know she already has that rationale, like, she's got the receipts already for it. And I can see something like that, but that's just me.
I agree. I mean, like the book said, and like the theme of the book is, the path to the dark side is deliberate. So if Vern has the dark side in her future, it would have to be a deliberate one, and it would have to be something that they completely sell, because although I would love for her to fall to the dark side from a narrative standpoint, I still would love for her to stay a Jedi Knight and stay on the light side. But the story that comes out of her falling would be interesting, and would create for a chance for redemption. But although I can't think of it right now, the circumstances in which she does fall, I'd love to see it and what that entails, and if that has anything to do with the Acolyte.
I mean, maybe Vern is the Acolyte.
Give it 2 thumbs up. I liked it a lot.
2 thumbs out of how many thumbs?
That's a good question. I only got the 2 on me right now, so I have to say it's 2 out of 2.
That's fair. That's fair. Yeah, I mean, for me, I did really enjoy the book. It's a simple read. It's a fast read. It's something that's not going to have you mentally charting things much. Sometimes it happens in these books where you are like, okay, I have to keep track of all of these people and where things are going. Overall, yeah, it's a fun read. I am going to give it a 7.5 out of 10. Loved all the characters. And the only reason it's not higher is because I have too many books that I think entertain me more.
And you don't want to diminish that rating.
I can't diminish those books. And that's why I still need to develop a charting system that pushes things down.
Yeah, I would have to agree. If I were to approach this from a non-numerical scaling standpoint, I would have to kind of create a new system. We're sort of like a charted spectrum where it's there's action, story, character, lore, and then just kind of plot them instead of ranking them. That way it just has a better idea of
Naruto bingo cards.
Exactly. Yeah, we just have a data graph.
Oh, I love this. Oh my goodness, we're gonna need to make this.
Yeah. So that's another collaboration, right? Let's all make this book infograph where we plot and kind of draw this web of connected dots as to how much is it narrative, how much is it character, how much is it lore, and how much of is it action. Give people an even more convoluted way to think about these books.
Yes, I love that. I also think that with books aimed at younger audiences, with middle grade and YA, I sort of have a different ranking system for them. And it's not because I expect them to be lesser. I don't mean to hierarchize here, but I think that they're aiming to do something different. And I think this book did what it set out to do in a way that was very enjoyable. And I was invested, I was entertained. So it probably wouldn't rank as high as other Star Wars books I've read, and yet I really liked it. I enjoyed it a lot.
Yeah, I did too. I mean, from a lore perspective, it's up there with the best of the books that I've read. In terms of providing a mythos for the Jedi and a learning curve for the learners and the new knights from that perspective. Setting aside all of the more technical and complicated stuff with story and narrative and reading level, it is probably one of the best books for lore and mythos in terms of the relationship between a Padawan and a knight and their relationship to the dark side and how the Jedi treated. It's definitely on my list of books to recommend to people. If I say, hey, how much of a reader are you? Is this where you want to start? Because if you ask me, well, how do I get started on Star Wars books? It's there's several options here. And I will start you on Light of the Jedi, first default position. But if you have a favorite era, Chaco likes to recommend certain books for certain eras. But if you are not a huge reader, I think starting with junior novels is a great way to become a reader, right? Mm-hmm. Some people don't read books, and some people are just itching to kind of reinforce their knowledge of the story and the universe, and so reading a junior novel could in fact make you a reader. Then you can go on to the Darth Bane trilogy, Darth Plagueis book, the Old Republic books, Light of the Jedi, Master and Apprentice, Bloodline, Tarkin, the Thrawn trilogy. You gotta be an avid reader to read these books. There's a lot of them. Yes, we are running out of time. And before we go, Fern, again, just where can people find you? What are some of the subjects you cover on your channel? And just closing remarks.
Well, thank you so much for having me on the podcast. I don't know if I would have read this book right away if I had not been invited to this podcast, and I'm so glad I did. And I'm so glad to have this conversation with both of you. You can find me on TikTok at FernAMG. I sort of talk about Star Wars from a humanities perspective, considering, things I've learned in religious studies classes, literature classes, history classes, and I try and apply that perspective to the Star Wars universe.
Awesome. Yes, she is a wonderful TikToker. Go follow her, guys, please. And
a force to be reckoned with, for sure.
Yeah.
We also definitely want to say thank you to Daniel José Older for coming on and talking to us. And he's got some cool projects coming out, specifically in the Star Wars universe. We have the High Republic Adventures comic, which is being released on February 3rd, as well as he has one of his own books called Flood City that is going to be coming out on February 2nd. So he's going to be busy soon, but follow him on TikTok and all those things.
And welcome him into the Star Wars TikTok community, because we have to show him.
The best Star Wars community.
We have to show him he's welcome. We have to show him it's a nice place to be. And of course, it was a pleasure to have you, Fern. It's always like I anticipated the conversation was going to be as insightful and as great as I pictured it, and it was a blast having you here. I definitely want you back. Put yourself down as being a series regular. But yeah, that's it.
Provided you want to.
Absolutely.
Yes,
absolutely.
definitely.
Don't want to get ahead. Yeah, just saying.
But yeah, that's it. On to the next one. May the Force be with you. We are all the Republic. For light.
For light and for life.